Now, I hope that we can stir some thoughts in your minds today. And if you should have a question, want some elucidation, whatever, give me some kind of sign, because I would like to clarify or address the question. I think it was a theo in theosophy that drew me to the Theosophical Society. I took part in your services for several months when you were in the house on 13th Street. That's been a while, I think. But for reasons I don't recall, I dropped away. I have not studied the writings of Madame Blavatsky, but I sensed in the Theosophical Society an interest in things that are beyond the explanations of science as we commonly understand science. There have been a number of incidents in my life that have no explanation in science, and they have brought me to understandings that lie on the fringe of Baptist teachings. I will describe those, since that is what led me to rational theism. But let me say up front that my purpose here today is to describe an approach to religion that embraces those incidents. If you search rational theism on the World Wide Web, you will discover there are others who have reached similar conclusions. I will describe as best I can the implications of rational theism. I've had a number of experiences that fall outside the ability of science to explain. I think that is because if you cannot see it or touch it or measure it, science cannot deal with it. And I have no physical reminder of these experiences, so recollection comes entirely from memory. I recall vividly when, as a child of 5 or 6, I suffered a bout of pneumonia. And I wonder why such an experience remained in my memory. But I recall looking down from a corner of the room at the ceiling at a child in bed and a woman bending over him in prayer. I was that child, and the woman was my mother. That image remained in my mind over the years, and it was more than 60 years before I realized that what I had experienced was an out-of-body event, where my spirit had temporarily left my body and was watching from a vantage point at the ceiling. I can still close my eyes and see that scene, and it's so sharply etched in my memory. I have recently read of research scientists who recognize there may be something real in such experiences and who are looking for ways to submit them to plausible research. If they'll ever reach the point of touching it or measuring it or seeing it, I don't know. Well, the next psychic event that I can recall was at the funeral of my brother, and I was about 21 at the time. And I was very distraught at his death, which was by suicide. As I was going up the steps of the church, headed for the sanctuary, I had a distinct message from him, telling me that in time I would understand. And that was immensely soothing, and the mental torment replaced by acceptance. Well, I married and my children grew up before I had another experience that I recall and regard as psychic. I had come to wonder about reincarnation and took a college course, which was, as college courses are, a series of lectures. My wife found a book by a hypnotist describing his work with past lives recalled, and I joined a 6-week series of meetings whose purpose was to experience past lives recall. Our lecturer used a relaxation technique rather than hypnosis. And after 2 sessions, she conducted us through our first past lives experience. In the relaxation technique, the client is dependent on his guide to suggest what to look for and what to do. She told us that because so many people had experiences in ancient Egypt, we would journey in our minds back to that time. After getting us relaxed and tuned into her words, she led us to examine various commonly experienced events. Strangely, I did not call up any imagery at all and simply listened until she suggested we examine our burial place. At that time, I saw a sarcophagus of stone with a broken door half open. The door looked like polished marble and was broken in two pieces. I have interpreted that tomb was a client of mine, and I had not myself lived in ancient Egypt, but had visited the tomb of my client. Now, I should emphasize this, that in the relaxation technique, you're limited to what your guide suggests you. Your guide will not indicate what you should take from the experience, but what things you should do, what things you should look for. For instance, looking at your feet or looking at your knees to see what kind of clothes you're wearing, or looking at your hands to see if there are age spots. It was quite distinct from the hypnotic technique, where the hypnotist and his client have a lot of give and take, so that you can explore an incident that interests you. Well, in our next session, our lecturer led us again, this time through a darkened tunnel into the light. Upon emerging, I saw on my left a ladder of light resembling a telephone pole with spikes, but the spikes were of light. She directed us to turn right. My ladder was on the left. She directed us to turn right. Proceed down the dirt road. She had us look at our pants. I was wearing knickers. Look at age spots on her hand. Look at our shoes. Mine were like pictures of what the pilgrims wore. Then around a bend in the road to the left, where there was an abandoned house on the right with thatched roof with a near broken corner. We went inside. It was a two-room house with no floor, just dirt. To the right, under a window, was a wooden structure apparently used for preparation of food. And I looked across the beam into the other room. It was completely dark. There were no windows. But I looked out the back door, and there was my ladder of light again. So I abandoned our guide and went up the ladder into what I supposed was a spaceship, and I soon found myself in a cubicle making a report. Now, I have no sense whatever of the content of that report. I was simply making the report on my visit to Earth. In our next session, we students paired off, and when my guide introduced me to a past life, I woke up in a bed under a green coverlet, but with two huge legs outside the covers. We walked around a bit, with everyone avoiding me, and came into what was apparently the kitchen, which had large tables with animals awaiting butchering, and two huge fireplaces, each with a huge pot suspended somehow. I didn't see how. To me, the clarity of the visual images I was experiencing was remarkable, as clear as looking at a screen of a TV set, and in exquisite detail. I assumed from people avoiding me, the coverlet on the bed and my size, that I was well fed and well placed politically, and we were likely in my castle. Toward the end of the session, my guide asked me what lesson my karma had dictated for this lifetime, and I answered as though I had been rehearsing. The response came so quickly. Might as well be king of a dung heap. To me, that's a remarkable insight into life. You know, through the sequence of several lifetimes, you're a man, you're a woman, you're rich, you're poor, various circumstances. But here I was apparently lord of the castle, and might as well have been king of the dung heap. That was really a remarkable lesson for me. Our last session of Prior Lives Recall placed me among American Indians, but there was nothing noteworthy in that session. I have not sought further prior lives experiences. The most influential psychic experience I have had was a visitation from my mother, dead some 50 years at the time. Now, I should probably take a moment to describe how that experience unfolded, because it's very uncommon. But I sensed in the middle of my head, between the ears, a pressure. And it suddenly became images. And that expanded into further images. What she said to me, don't feel badly toward us about, and us I take to be her, my father, my brother, where I had been punished for disagreeable stunts by my brother, who was the favored child. I wondered how, in that context, I could have been reminded of events from early childhood that had grated on my memory while I was growing up. But I took that as validation of the experience, that this was indeed what it seemed to be, a visitation from my dead mother. And I just could not escape the reality of that visitation. Following the validation was a statement, "We love you." Plural, present tense. And then her reason for visiting, which had dealt with my recent divorce, with a statement, sometimes bad things happen, but they make way for other experiences. And that statement had a profound effect on my acceptance of the course of my divorce and other things. When I rationalized how it was possible I had experienced that visitation, I was forced to recognize that the spirits of the departed still exist. And there has to be some mechanism by which contact is possible. That visitation was a crucial event in forcing me to recognize the context that became the foundation of rational theism. I've had one additional psychic experience, this past summer. I had an 8-year close relationship with a woman who died this past May. I was standing in the kitchen between sink and dining table when I was overcome by the sense of the presence of her spirit. That was around noon, and I did not learn of her death until some 6 hours later in the early evening. Somehow I knew it was her spirit. I suggested in my mind that she could now visit her late son who had died a year earlier. The sense of her presence left me instantly. I thought that was remarkable. As soon as I formed a thought she can visit her son, she left me. She did return in the evening and remained overnight. But I have marveled at her instant response to the suggestion she visit her son, and later return of her spirit's presence. I have on and off since then felt her spirit was nearby, although I have not at any time sensed any sort of message. Well, so much for the recitation of why I believe as I do, why my religious interpretation of life has taken the turn that it has. Let me now describe where my application of rational thought has taken me. Should I stop here for further discussion, questions? Let me now describe where my application of rational thought has taken me. The foundation is this. The universe, the galaxies, the stars, our solar system with its sun and earth comprise the physical realm, which includes life on earth. And the physical realm is a component part of a much more inclusive spirit realm where individual spirits are recognizable as individuals without birth or death. And I think that's essentially in tune with theosophy. Individual spirits are from time to time assigned to human bodies undergoing development. So we are spirit beings, each of us with a body of bone, flesh, blood, and mind that is the home and servant of the spirit. While the brain controls the body, the spirit governs the mind. It's remarkable enough that it is known as the spirit realm that a new body is undergoing development. But there must be a match between an individual spirit awaiting his term in physical life and a physical body. Matching spirits with bodies must take into account the spirit's karma, the inheritable characteristics of that body, and the situation into which that person is being born. It must be anticipated that the combination of inherited characteristics and opportunities presented by the context of the parent's life will afford opportunities to influence that spirit's karma. I think it's obvious at this point that any notion of predestination is precluded. There is no master plan for the life of any of us, so what choices you make are the product of your own free will to choose as you wish within the constraints of your life. There are a number of consequences that grow from that view of life. First and foremost, it is obvious that there must be some sort of organization in the spirit realm. And that requires a head, deity, for which I have chosen to use the name God. My interpretation is that the organization of the spirit realm embraces the entire universe, so it may well be that a subordinate spirit, perhaps the spirit that possessed Jesus of Nazareth, is actually the dominant spirit on our planet. Let me repeat that I am a spirit in possession of a physical body. That body has the brain, which is influenced by the mind, which in turn is controlled by the spirit. So going from the spirit realm and its subordinate physical realm, how do we approach the various religious topics? I have to drop back to the time when there was nothing at all anywhere. It was an empty universe, and time just kept running on. But there was instability in that emptiness, and from time to time, here and there was an eruption that produced particles or energies that quickly reunited to leave the same nothingness as before. But something that happens once can happen again. And so eventually, two eruptions occurred close enough in time and space that they interacted with each other, so recombination did not occur, and there was a residue. In time, there was sufficient accumulation of these residues that there was a combination into protons and some other elementary particles, and there was gradual accumulation of elementary particles. Now, I'm not a student of quantum physics, but I have been told that the underlying equations of quantum physics allow for a residue, unexplained, but the equations allow for a residue. And I can't help wondering if there's a connection between that and this. Of course, gravity asserted itself, and particles were drawn together, and eventually there was such an accumulation that there was an explosion, which was the first little bang. What was flung apart in the explosion remained under the influence of gravity, so the process continued. So another bang, incorporating newly formed particles, was greater than the bang before. And in time, there was the Big Bang that astronomers make so much of. And incidentally, I've noticed in recent readings on astronomy that little by little the community is coming around to this point of view, that there could not have been a Big Bang without some sort of precursor, some sort of preparation. So some of the physicists are now looking at what that precursor was. I arrived at this picture of origins before I learned that physicists in their high-energy machines had detected in extreme vacuum both real and virtual particles and energies that could be observed and had real consequences. So there's been experimental verification of my suggestion that instabilities in the initial emptiness led to our universe. Just as real particles and energies combined to form electrons, protons, and neutrons, or whatever else there was in the physical realm, the virtual particles and energies combined to form the spirits that inhabit the spirit realm. An organization of these spirits led to a structure with its head, God. And let me comment on the origin of God. Some people insist that God always existed. But it is a characteristic, you all know this, it's a characteristic of intellect that it must be engaged. So if God preceded everything else, always existed, he must have lacked intellect since there was nothing to engage that intellect. So that reinforces the idea that the coalescing of the spirit elements resulted in the spirit realm and God. Hence, the existence of God must of necessity be a consequence of the same activities that produce the physical universe. So God did not design and create the various energies and chemicals that make up the universe, including the little island Earth in that enormous sea of space. God, in carrying out his activities, has been constrained to work with the physical universe as it is rather than creating it. That says nothing about evolution of life itself or evolution of the multitude of life forms with which we are familiar. Well, I can't address that. It just seemed to me that before this nothingness of space erupted, there was nothing there to form anything. So it was the virtual aspects of that eruption of nothingness that led to God. So I can't address your question. In reaching our understanding of religion, our first attempt is to reach some understanding of God and his characteristics. Jesus said that God is a spirit, and I recognize nothing that can contradict that. So we cannot be physically like him. We do not and perhaps cannot know the interplay between the spirit and physical realms, nor can we know the extent of God's influence in shaping events that led to the creation of our galaxy or our solar system or our planet and home. Nor can we know details of how his spirit realm is organized to service the myriad units within the universe. But I submit that he or his subordinates under his influence have been actively involved in what we call evolution. Species have arisen and perished as part of an ongoing saga, influenced from time to time by personalities in the spirit realm intervening to influence or alter circumstances in the physical realm. Evolution proceeds at its own pace, with or without involvements from the spirit realm. But deity and his surrogates have not withdrawn from active involvement, and man is not, lest he destroy his own kind, the end of evolution. The mind of God we cannot presume to know. I note that every creature, and indeed all living things, the creepy crawlers, man, sunflowers, dinosaurs, is each an individual being enjoying individual autonomy, each a product of the forces in which we are immersed. In what manner does he exercise oversight? I suggest his attention is focused wherever he chooses, but he has subordinates assigned to maintain his involvement with Earth, with mankind, and with us. Since I have benefited from the results of prayer, I am convinced that whatever the structure of the spirit realm, he has provided access to his wisdom and sympathies. Does God have in mind an end product for me, for our species, for our Earth, or indeed for the universe itself? I feel that he takes an active role whenever and wherever it suits his fancy, for whatever end he at the time has in mind. The ongoing saga is an experience for him as much as it is for you and for me. And really, from a master personality, what else would you expect? Part of the pleasure of observing something is the uncertainty about what is going to happen next. So I feel that the deity has been observing most of the time and enjoying what he saw. The personality of God, however valid they may be, our clues are in our religious documents and in our own experiences. God has not changed over the millennium. It is man's understanding of God that has changed. The notion that we were created in God's image, since God is a spirit, cannot indicate that we are of a physical form like him. Rather, we are in spirit, comparable to him. Jesus of Nazareth presented a picture of God as loving, wise, patient, just, and merciful. To be like him, we must reflect God's personality as described by those having a closer bond with him, perhaps the person Jesus. If you read critically the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, you can discern that deity is often presented as disagreeable, hateful, vengeful, pernicious. Reflect on the origin of religion and the natural bent of men to seek dominance over their fellows. Then consider the paucity of scientific understanding in ancient times and the explanations of events we now understand differently. It seems obvious that the priesthood evolved to assert power over their subjects. It served their purpose to be the means of intervening with a disagreeable deity on behalf of their tribal members. I was reared in an atmosphere of inerrancy of the Bible, in acceptance of the literal words in contemporary English of the Bible as the actual wording God chose. While prayer may have influenced use of specific wording, I cannot suggest it is all God's wording. God did not take pen in hand, nor did he overpower the hands of the authors to induce or force a trance, to force a recording of words of his choice. To what extent, then, does the Torah, or Bible, or Koran, or Upanishads, or whatever, present the words in their sequence that the deity would present for our guidance as humankind? Individual authors, true to their own vocabulary and manner of expression, wrote from their own experiences. Devout people sincerely attempting to serve God through their agency in the spirit, in the physical realm, carrying out the will of God as they sensed it at the time. I suggest rather than describing physical occurrences, many presentations of our religious documents are allegorical. They are intended to present abstractions of what a description of a series of events would convey only poorly. And we have today devout people sincerely trying to present interpretations of whatever written record they honor for the enlightenment and guidance of contemporary people. And we have our share of charlatans whose motive is first to serve themselves. If God can appropriate their efforts to his advantage, then we applaud those successes. Hark to this. Many a preacher has shouted, if you want to know God's will for your life, or how he wishes you to deal with the problem, study the Bible. I'm sure the preacher would be equally adamant that God is not withdrawn from human affairs. Yet the logic is sure. If it is all in the Bible, then the Bible has replaced God as the wellspring of contemporary revelation. Is this not worship of the Bible itself, rather than the God who inspired men to write what's in the Bible? A God who loves me must be my contemporary and can as surely communicate on a continuing basis now as he did then. I've come to a method of squaring different views of religions and faiths and sects and so on. And I call it the house of man. And my wisdom is not adequate. Let me describe all the different religions and pick out from them the things that are most likely to be true. But if you consider the idea of a courtyard where all these activities are taking place, and the various savants standing at a window in that courtyard, the view of each one is going to be different. So while they're attempting to serve God, they arrive at these different interpretations. So my birth, life, and death are part of an undirected saga as mankind struggles to reach perfection. We take a miracle, we take a miracle as a setting aside of natural law, whether or not we understand it, to accomplish a specific deed or event. In the annals of history, it has been common to interpret as a miracle any occurrence that could not at that time be otherwise explained. I have noted during Bible study that many events described fall outside our present or future ability to explain. I also note that in earlier times, if one could not cite miraculous behavior or events, his message was not considered worthy of attention. Thus, many events are cast into a framework of miracles where otherwise a very ordinary explanation might have been offered, or no mention at all of that event. This is not to deny the possibility of intervention by the deity or his agents. I am a proponent of deistic evolution. And again, if you read my website, you'll find that I describe how deity became involved in evolution, which proceeds at its own pace, with occasional interruptions or interventions by God or his agents. Because of the state of generally accepted scientific knowledge at the time of their composition, we will likely forever be confronted in our religious documents with presentations that include miraculous events, however plausible or implausible they may seem to the modern reader. The notion of communication with deity or prayer confounds many. How can a sequence of words running through the mind, unuttered audibly, be received or responded to by deity or his surrogates? It's one of the mysteries of faith. Yet I have been the recipient of needed advice on many occasions through the mechanism of prayer. It has often been the case that I have experienced origination of an idea as an immediate consequence of a mental petition for assistance with some problem I faced, real or imagined. I could recount scores, but let me present only these. While I was in business, I was often confronted with a need for a decision on some aspect of operation, such as how to handle a disciplinary problem with an employee, or deal with a recalcitrant customer. Invariably, after I had exhausted myself searching for ideas and turned to prayer, an idea presented itself that was superior to anything I had considered. After my heart attack, a personal desire kept plaguing me, and I persistently in prayer asked for guidance. The response was always the same: you know what you must do. That continued until I had completed a significant portion of my website. The response to prayer changed to review possible possibilities. The urge to produce my website seems a direct outgrowth of my prayers. I have no recollection of the point in producing the website that change in response occurred. But whether that personal desire will ever be fulfilled, I leave as part of my walk with God. While my prayers for material assistance have influenced other people to provide specific help of physical things such as money, I cannot know if my prayers influence someone else. It's difficult to insist that others have been attuned to deity to the extent that their actions were in response to my prayer. There have been many instances where people, some not at all devout or even religious, have produced for me the result I sought in prayer. Now, I won't speculate on the involvement of deity in such incidents, but I will stoutly deny that pre-planning of all those lives produced those results. Perhaps I've been favored in some manner as a result of my confrontation with God, which produced my walk with God. Who can know what goes on in the heart of another? It is between him and his God whether his notion of deity and devotion to deity is the same as yours. It is my personal preference to emphasize subordination to God, the Master Spirit. Others have adopted worship of Jesus, the Son, the second member of the Trinity. It is the quality of religious experience that stirs the heart and gives us peace. Open respect for personal experiences, such as in charismatic churches or public displays, should not be denigrated by those who do not understand. And I've attended charismatic services. Dealing with heaven, hell, karma, and what follows this life, I want to ask a couple questions. In a physical resurrection, which is taught in many religions, including many Christian faiths, how will you, your ancestors, and your descendants recognize each other? How can individuals from various historical settings all coexist in a single environment? At what age will you appear so grandparents recognize the infant they knew, or you can recognize your own grandchildren? Faced with this question, we must perceive that When the spirit departs the body, it continues its existence as a spirit without physical substance. How they remember, how they recognize, how they communicate without physical senses is hid from our present understanding. The other question I present to you is this. Where are heaven and hell located? A physical location is inconsistent with our expanding knowledge of our universe, since it must be inviolate by physical beings. We can't expect them to move as man explores beyond Earth or other intelligent beings explore beyond their home planet. In other words, we can't expect either heaven or hell to be wandering. If there is a purgatory, so transgressions while on earth can be adequately atoned, it must also be in the spirit realm. I assert that a physical heaven and a physical hell are the inventions of preachers. The Bible does not support them very well. I am uncertain about karma, how appropriate needs in another's physical life can be determined, since an unworthy life adds to the burdens of karma, and a worthy life reduces the burdens of karma. As I view karma and repeated lives in the physical realm, any one life may have specific lessons to be learned or worked out, as determined in the selection of a host body with its own genetic disposition, born to parents in a setting that offers opportunities for needed activities or developments. It's a fair question. Existence in the spirit realm, what is it like? I can only speculate. The organization of reality, the combination of spirit realm and physical realm, seems complex, well beyond my ability to understand. I sought and experienced prior life recall on 4 separate occasions. The degree of detail was amazingly complete. Those experiences, plus the visitation by my dead mother, have served to convince me that the totality of existence is far more complex than is obvious in our bodily experience here on earth. What must it be like to be a distinct or recognizable and functioning individual without bodily apparatus for sight, sound, taste, touch, and memory? How can it be? How can it be possible? There's memory of many prior lives when there is no physical data storage mechanism. It's no wonder there's competition in the spirit realm for opportunities to experience life in the physical realm, to have tangible organs of sense and bodily sensations. It is remarkable that entities in the spirit realm know of developing bodies to host spirits awaiting their turn. These are mysteries that tantalize our curiosity. But I have to leave inquiry into those characteristics, because I cannot imagine what means is available to me to seek to find answers. What connection exists between kinship in the spirit realm and biological lines on earth? I have no insight. Although members of the spirit realm may cluster around specific objectives and realign as time and events transpire, I suspect that all are of essentially one family, with few regarding themselves as especially privileged. Assuming that in various periods of existence on earth, activities by the spirit possessing the body known as Jesus of Nazareth resulted in biological change of progeny, we should not expect those changes to alter relationships of spirits in the spirit realm. Your own future, assuming there is validity to the notion of your spirit surviving deaths of your body and possibly having a future physical existence on this planet, what sort of environment do you expect to find? Under the action of karma, you should expect to be in the midst of consequences of your own deeds, in a setting from the environmental destruction or preservation growing from the attitudes and practices of your then prior life. If you find that environment appealing, then you should continue your present practices. For myself, I shudder at the consequences of our civilization continuing on its present course of thoughtless greed and plunder. I would like to think of this lovely garden filled with all sorts of tantalizing creatures and vegetation. What I fear is it would be more like a garbage dump in a community of scarcity and deprivation. You owe it to your own future to be a thoughtful steward of the environment you presently inhabit, and I'll sign off at that. Precious little. I've experienced things. I've not sought a rational explanation for them. I've interpreted what seemed to me the most logical way to look at it. Yeah, the only thing I can say is this, that on many different occasions when I had the business, I would have a problem and I just could not see a clear way to resolve it. And after searching my mind for some way, I would resort to prayer. And remarkably, that when I came out of prayer, I had the solution. Now, how it transpired, how it got there, I don't know. But I wonder if there's a connection between that and the fact that the lady friend I mentioned, whose spirit visited me immediately on her death, how I was aware of that. And, I really don't know what the connection is, if there is a connection. But the remarkable thing is that when I, in my mind, formulated the idea that she could now visit her late son, who had died a year earlier, she was gone instantaneously.
You think she didn't like that?
No, I think she went to visit him. Yeah, I think she went to visit him. Because she came back later in the day. No, I prayed repeatedly. I had wanted a significant other. I'd wanted a woman in my life. I enjoyed married life, and my wife left, and there was that emptiness for many years, and I prayed for something to fill that emptiness. And honestly, I kept getting the same response until and I don't know how much of the website I had done at that point, but the answer changed. And we began to look at possibilities. Who was there that might be of interest? God, you know my heart. You know what my desire is. Please, if there's any way that you can contribute to a solution, please do so. That's it. It's remarkable. You form an idea in your mind, and it's on the heavenly track or whatever it is. Of course, there's the other side of the coin. You need to be careful what goes through your mind, because they're tuned into that too.
Right, yeah. Well, I just absolutely, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. You fix it. And
Yeah.
that just really, that was on my mind. And then about prayer. Say, God, everything fell into place in a beautiful way. And it was amazing.
It has been remarkable to me that the prayers that I've prayed have had the results that they have. And the people that did something to ease the burden that I was feeling at the time were not necessarily devout people. They could have been atheists for all I knew. But the answers came. It wasn't just answers. The results came. An empty checkbook. I've got a bill to pay. Results came. Now, I remember when I was treasurer of a church, I hadn't thought about this for a long time, but we seemed to be perennially short on money. But every time, without fail, every time when some particular bill was due, it's fixing to become past due, money all of a sudden appeared. I never understood that, but it happened. Yeah, I told you earlier.
Yes.
You know what you must do. Of course, I didn't. I didn't have any idea. But when I had completed a significant part of the website, the answer to prayer changed. Now, I wish I could remember where in that development it happened, but I don't. I think there's more to it than that. Because, as I say, there were times that I had a particular need, and I prayed about it. And that need was satisfied. Now, these are other people involved. Can't be entirely within me. So, Well, I hadn't thought too much about this. You're correct, because the spirit that resides in you is in contact with that greater entity, whatever it is. So that your petition reaches ears that are capable of responding. And yes, it's entirely within me just putting my petition out there. But I think it must be the action of the Spirit that brings it to fruition. I've enjoyed it.
So did we. Thank you.